There is a story whispered between ancient scrolls and lost memories. A moment so powerful, it left the heavens in awe and the earth trembling. A day when creatures thought to be invincible, bent the knee before one man. Not a king with armies. Not a warrior with swords. But a man marked by something far greater, the presence of the Most High. We are told that giants once walked the earth. Colossal beings, born of forbidden unions, terrorizing the land and mocking the will of God. Their strength was unmatched. Their arrogance, unshakable. Until they encountered one man. What could cause beings of such might to bow? Today, we reveal the truth. Not just of giants, but of the divine order they could not defy. Of a man who did not fight with steel, but with fire from heaven. And of the power that still lives, not in legend, but in the spirit of those chosen by God. So listen closely. Because this is not mythology. This is the forgotten history of spiritual dominion. And you were meant to witness it. Speech balloon. Comment below what part shook your soul the most. Outbox Stray. Share this with someone who needs to understand the war behind the visible. In the days before the flood, when the sons of God took the daughters of men, a new race was born. The Nephilim. Giants. Warriors of renown. The ancients feared them. Civilizations fell before them. Their bones littered the lands. Their names echoed in fear. But not all men trembled. Among the chaos, there was a remnant. And among the remnant, there was one. A man of silence, but not weakness. A man who didn't lift his voice, but whose obedience spoke louder than thunder. The world around him burned with corruption. But this man walked with God. And the giants, they noticed. They mocked him at first. Laughed at his righteousness. Called him a fool for not bowing to the age of flesh. But as the skies began to shift and the heavens stirred, the very ground that upheld the giants began to betray them. For this man wasn't chosen by men. He was chosen by Elohim. And in the stillness of a day like any other, the giants came. Not with roars. Not with swords. But with silence. Their eyes, once blazing with pride, now dimmed with realization. The presence surrounding the man could not be touched. The glory upon him could not be mocked. And though their bodies towered over him, their spirits crumbled in his shadow. Because when heaven stands with a man, all of hell must kneel. And the giants knelt. Not to the man himself, but to the God he carried. That day wasn't recorded in temples or painted on cave walls. But the realm of spirits remembers it. And every knee that rose in rebellion, was reminded that no strength, no bloodline, no forbidden creation, can withstand a man aligned with the voice of the Most High. They came to intimidate. They left trembling. Because when a man walks in obedience, even the greatest enemies must bow. They had ruled without question. Feasted without boundaries. Built kingdoms not in honor of heaven, but in defiance of it. The giants, these sons of rebellion, were not just beings of flesh. They were shadows of an ancient transgression. Born from the unholy union of celestial beings and human women, they carried power, but not authority. They inherited might, but not dominion. They were illegitimate kings in a borrowed world. But one man, unnamed by most, unseen by many, walked differently. He didn't speak the language of fear. He didn't dance with the culture of corruption. His very steps were offensive to the atmosphere around him, because righteousness, when walked out loud, becomes a sword. The watchers had fallen. Their offspring, the Nephilim, believed themselves untouchable. Their bloodline stretched across the mountains, their hands had shaped monuments that mocked God, their appetites had consumed cities. But none of their works had prepared them for presence. For holiness is not loud. It is not aggressive. But when it enters a place, it commands. And that day, as the man stood alone, no army behind him, no weapon in his hand, the sky changed color. The clouds shifted shape. And time itself paused, as if heaven was watching through a thin veil. They approached him not as conquerors, but as men haunted by prophecy. Somewhere, somehow, they had heard of this kind of man. The one who walked like Enoch. The one who built like Noah. The one who burned like Elijah, though he bore no fire in his hands, only in his spirit. And when they looked into his eyes, they didn't see flesh. They saw the image of the one they had rejected. He didn't run. He didn't flinch. He simply stood. And in that stillness, the realm shook. The giants, used to resistance, were met with submission, not from the man, but from creation itself. The earth no longer favored them. The wind no longer obeyed their call. The animals, once terrified of them, scattered. Because when God marks a man, the entire universe recognizes it. They fell to their knees, not out of worship, but out of terror. Terror of what they had become. Terror of what they had touched. Terror of what they could not overcome. The man spoke no curses. He lifted no blade. He simply bore witness. The presence within him was enough. And for the first time, these giants, builders of cities, slayers of men, lords of the high places, were made to feel what they had never known, submission. They bowed not to flesh, but to spirit. And heaven recorded it. A moment when the proud were humbled. When the fallen were confronted. When darkness bowed before light. And this man, simply walked away. Not because he was weak. But because the battle had already been won in the spirit. He carried no throne, wore no crown. Yet he ruled the moment. Because authority is not in appearance, it's in alignment. Alignment with the God who sees. The God who judges. The God who preserves a remnant even in the days of giants. And now you know, they did bow. The story was not myth. It was not fable. It was truth buried by time, but preserved by heaven. And now that it has found your ears, you must ask yourself. Am I aligned with the one who commands giants to kneel? The moment passed, but the memory did not. Because when giants kneel, the spirit realm records it in fire. The earth had groaned for justice. Blood had soaked the soil, spilled by the hands of creatures never meant to exist. These giants, forged in rebellion, had distorted the order of creation. They were the scars of heaven's broken trust and mankind's stolen innocence. But that day, when they knelt, it was as if creation exhaled. A divine hush fell over the land. It wasn't the end, not yet. But it was the warning. The whisper of judgment coming like a rising storm. And the man, he walked away not untouched, but transformed. Because once you've stood in the center of a confrontation between heaven and darkness, you never walk the same. He was no longer merely a man of righteousness. He became a prophetic sign. Angels marked the moment. Demons trembled at it. And the giants, though they rose again, would never forget the presence they bowed to. Their strength had failed them. Their bloodline had betrayed them. Their pride had collapsed. They had bowed before a man who carried no blade, only presence. And that presence carried something even more terrifying to the forces of darkness, alignment. The giants feared men who were strong. But they were undone by men who were aligned. Because alignment with the Most High brings an authority that surpasses bloodlines, titles, and even angels. It shakes unseen thrones. It cancels dark agendas. It silences ancestral strongholds. This man, silent, steadfast, surrendered, had reminded the world that dominion was never about size. It was about submission to God. He bore no mark on his skin, but the Spirit marked him eternally. He had not sought war, but became a battlefield where heaven triumphed. And after the giants departed, limping away with heads low and eyes hollow, the man turned his face to the heavens, and wept. Not for fear. Not for glory. But because he understood the weight of being chosen. And so began the trembling of the giants. Not at earthquakes. Not at weapons. But at men and women who truly walk with God. Even today, their shadows remain in the spiritual realm. Their influence still tries to corrupt through systems, through pride, through the worship of power and self. But the story of their submission has never been erased. And every time a remnant rises, aligned in obedience and truth, the giants remember. They remember the fire they could not touch. The authority they could not mock. The man they could not crush. Because obedience is more terrifying than strength. Holiness is more devastating than warfare. And the presence of God, alive in one person, can dismantle generations of rebellion. You see, this was not just a moment. It was a prophecy. A shadow of the ultimate authority that would one day come in flesh, not just to make giants kneel, but to crush their legacy forever. But even now, the spirit of that moment lives. In every man and woman willing to walk like that man walked. To stand in quietness, clothed in fire. To be the kind of vessel before whom even the proudest darkness must bow. And so we ask. When the giants return, in ideology, in power, in deception, will you be one of the few they recognize? Not by your face. But by the presence that surrounds you. When the giants fell to their knees before that man of presence, they did not vanish. They retreated. Shaken. Humbled. But not yet destroyed. Because judgment had not yet descended, it was only approaching. The flood was not far. The warning had been given. But mercy still held back the waters. And in that brief silence between the bowing and the flood, the giants moved through the shadows. Some died. Others fled. Their bodies may have been mortal, but their legacy was not. The bloodline that should have ended there, it stretched. Slithered. Hid. And multiplied through whispers and wombs. Because rebellion rarely dies in open confrontation. It hides. It adapts. It infects. So their influence bled into tribes, into cultures, into kings. Some of their names were remembered, as gods. Others as legends. They became myths carved in stone, painted in temples, worshipped through fear. But their origin was never divine. It was corruption wearing the mask of divinity. And those who bowed that day, their descendants remembered the shame. They taught their children not humility, but vengeance. Not fear of the Most High, but hatred of His image. And from generation to generation, they waited for the moment to rise again. Because the war was not over. It had only changed forms. Giants no longer walked as titans on the earth. They walked through bloodlines, through influence, through kings who sat on thrones with no fear of heaven. They entered the halls of power, cloaked in intellect and empire. They didn't need size anymore. They had system. But something else survived that day too, something stronger. The fire. The same fire that had surrounded the man they once bowed before. The flame of holiness. The anointing that cannot be taught or earned, only carried. And that fire moved through the earth like a thin, unbroken thread. It showed up in the wilderness when a bush burned and a shepherd heard his name. It stood as a cloud by day and fire by night. It whispered through prophets. It fell on altars. It split seas and silenced lions. It consumed offerings and demons alike. And every time it appeared, the shadows flinched. Because they remembered the day they bowed. The day that presence proved stronger than pride. The giants who had fled knew they could not face the fire again. So they worked to corrupt it. To twist the truth. To seduce the carriers of presence with comfort, with pride, with distraction. Because if they could not defeat the fire, they would try to dilute it. And many fell. Many forgot. But some remembered. Some still carried it. They walked as outcasts. Prophets. Judges. Desert men. Wild women. carriers of something that the giants feared more than armies, unshakable obedience. And the blood of those giants still trembles when presence shows up. Not in noise. Not in popularity. But in stillness, in prayer, in surrender. That is where the battle was always won. That is where giants fall without a sword being raised. Because in the spirit realm, it's not size that matters. It's submission. It's alignment. It's fire. And the giants knew this. So they aimed not at strength, but at consecration. Not at warriors, but at worshippers. They targeted the heart, not the hand. Because if they could separate the people from the presence, they would never have to bow again. But even now, the fire burns. A remnant is rising. Not loud. Not polished. But marked. Marked by the same presence that once brought the mighty to their knees. You can feel it. Can't you? In the air. In your bones. In the tug inside your spirit that says, this world is not your home. That longing for something older than time and purer than gold. That voice calling you into the wilderness again. Because the giants have returned. Not in form, but in function. In influence. In ideology. In rebellion. And they walk boldly now, thinking the fire has died. But the remnant is awakening. And they carry the same presence. The same flame. The same authority before which darkness trembles and giants bow. There is a stirring in the heavens again. The same trembling that once signaled the fall of the watchers. The same spiritual shifting that marked the days before the flood. It is happening again, not in water this time, but in fire. And just like before, giants walk the earth. They don't carry spears. They carry systems. They don't crush villages. They infiltrate nations. They don't stand tall in flesh. They crouch low in media, culture, ideologies. But make no mistake, their nature has not changed. The spirit that once mocked righteousness still speaks through the mouths of kings and influencers. The rebellion that once roared across ancient valleys now whispers from glowing screens. And the people, like in the days of Noah, have grown numb. They've traded presence for platform. Holiness for hype. Obedience for applause. And the fire, though never extinguished, has been hidden under compromise. But heaven has not forgotten. The altar still cries out. The Spirit still searches for a vessel. And the voice that once called a man to stand before giants is calling again. You see, every time rebellion rises, so does a remnant. And this generation is not exempt. There are those who walk quietly among the crowds, unnoticed, uncelebrated, but anointed. They don't carry swords. They carry surrender. They don't build towers. They build altars. They are misunderstood, misjudged, and often mocked, just like the man the giants once bowed to. But these are the ones marked by fire. And the time is drawing near. Because the giants have grown bold again. They believe the presence has left. They believe the fire is gone. They believe they will never bow again. But they are wrong. Heaven is aligning. The veil is thinning. And soon, the authority they have mocked will confront them again, not through cathedrals or kingdoms, but through consecrated vessels. A remnant will rise, burning not with hatred, but with holiness. They will not shout, but their silence will thunder. They will not march, but their steps will shake the unseen. And the giants will remember. They will remember the fire they once bowed to. The glory they could not touch. The man they could not move. Because God always leaves a witness. He always reserves a voice. Always marks a generation. And always confronts rebellion through the obedience of one. That's why the giants rage, not because they are powerful, but because they are afraid. They see the signs. They hear the tremble in the spirit realm. They feel the presence returning. And they know, judgment is near. Not judgment born of wrath, but of truth. Not destruction by water, but refinement by fire. And when it comes, when the true remnant stands, the giants will bow again. Not because they want to, but because they must. For no rebellion, no bloodline, no principality, no system, can stand in the presence of the Holy One. And those who carry that presence, fully aligned, fully surrendered, become walking altars. Living witnesses. Walking judgments. You are not weak. You are not forgotten. You are not late. You were born for this time. To stand when others bow. To carry what the giants cannot counterfeit. To be the kind of flame they fear. Because the Spirit is searching. The fire is falling. And the remnant is awakening. Not to fame. Not to comfort. But to glory. Pushpin subscribe to this channel so you never miss these revelations. Thumbs up like this video to push this truth deeper into the algorithm.